Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to thank Dr. Ashok Khosla for inviting me to this forum. The moment I heard that this is going to be about Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, I was most excited because this is my first platform I have in Delhi to talk about the state or the Union Territory. I've been involved in the state of Jammu and Kashmir in the Kashmir Valley for over 4 years now, so I take this opportunity to share some of the insights, some of the learnings. And like you said, that I have primarily worked in Punjab because I come from Punjab, from the area, from the borders. And I learned from my guru in conservation that it's good to be a provincial architect to know the grounds. So I worked largely in Punjab and then fanned out. And I've been engaging with the government a lot, though I don't agree with many of the ways things are done because I'm a practitioner, a person who looks at policy but actually works hands-on on detail. So, but I do believe that good governance is our right, and whether you agree or you do not agree with any kind of a political policy, it's you. If you want better governance, you better be there, to engage with. So my clients have primarily been Archaeological Survey of India, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and things like that. Now, what I show in my first the cover is the nature work that I've done. And I'll give a little background that why I find Kashmir very fascinating is because the Sikhs do have a connection with the people in the army here would know that with Maharaja Ranjit Singh, how Ladakh and Kashmir became part of what is India today, because General Gupta of INTAC once asked me, he says, what is the contribution of Maharaja Ranjit Singh? And I said, I don't know. He said, if it hadn't been for them, then the western border of India would have been the river Yamuna, because under him is when the western border got defined. So the Sikhs went into Kashmir in the early part of the 19th century with General Zorawar there and so on. And it's also part of a troubling bit of history for the Kashmiris. So for me, as a student of history, it's very interesting to watch what happened, because subsequently the Dogras bought Kashmir from the British. How many of us know that Kashmir was paid, the Dogra kings led down the Sikh kingdom? I'm going to use some very, politically incorrect words here. They actually led down the Sikh kingdom after Maharaja Ranjit Singh died, and they bought the Kashmir Valley from the British for 73 lakhs. And because of that entire valley, they owned everything. The average Kashmiri did not own anything. I was a bit shocked when I heard that what we call in Punjab as the Nanak Shahi brick, or in Lahore, in the Mughal period, is called Lakhori brick. In Kashmir, it's called Maharaji brick. And why it's called Maharaji brick is because only the Maharaj had the rights to a burnt brick. Otherwise, the Kashmiris could not have burnt bricks. I mean, it's quite interesting to understand this, what is this legacy that the Kashmiris inherited? Subsequently, when Punjab and this whole area had, referring to Punjab because I understand Punjab's history and the rest of the country, so I would keep making reference to that. In the early part of the 20th century, there was a big Prajab Mandal movement, which was the Lal Jhanda movement, anti the kings and all that of Patiala and so on in the 1920s. At the same time, Kashmir also had an anti-establishment movement, and I saw this because the way I understand history is through a monument or a site or a city that I work with. So I was working on the silk factory in Srinagar, and silk, it's a huge legacy, the Mulberry silk in the valley, as well as Jammu. And they call it Twarike-Resham Khana, where there was a peasant uprising against Dogra kings because they wanted to improve the quality of life and so on. And there were few of the weavers who were there associated with the silk factory actually were shot, died in this particular protest. So for me, it is when I look at contested histories, it's a learning curve. I went to Germany to understand that how do the Germans relate to their contested history and how do they bring in reconciliation. So for me to pick up these matters of contested history is to understand that how do we reconcile today? We don't have to keep living that pain again and again. How do you reconcile? So when I find solutions for my conservation, through my work in conservation, is that working with heritage, human settlement, living culture, can it bring in reconciliation? So the nature projects that I have been involved in the last 4 years is, first of all, if you were to look at the picture on the top two, are the covers of these two project proposals I gave to the Department of Education, which is conservation and adaptive reuse of these two buildings. The one on the left is the house of Allama Anwar Shah Kashmiri, a very famous poet from Kupwara area. Now, his family wants to sell that house. It's a very beautiful timber house, and he's very, very well known as somebody who's, as a learned writer, who was also involved with the Khilafat movement. The house on the right is a school building. It was a house of Ghulam Ahmad Ashai. And Ashai family was the first registrar of the Kashmir University, started the Reading Party, which was a precursor to the National Conference, I think. It doesn't matter what affiliation, but these are two important, very important historic buildings and a lot of learnings as far as architecture is concerned. The bottom one on the right is a project that we did for the silk factory. The one on the left is my current project with the Ministry of Tourism, Government of India, which is under their Swadesh Darshan on a heritage circuit. And what we did was, when I was trying to understand what is heritage for Kashmir, and I realized it's the waters, because you look at the course of the river Jhelum, all the way from Verinag down when it leaves from the pass, from Baramulla, leaves the valley, and in the middle somewhere up, not so much in the middle, but more towards the end, is where you have Srinagar with all its lakes and all that. So how life, nature and culture, how it impacts life of people and how it defines culture. So we call it Waters of Kashmir, Heritage, Spaces and Living Culture. This is what the valley looks like. For me, as a student of heritage and of culture and architecture, you know, the moment you're living in the plains of Punjab or in the plains, life is simpler because this, you know, climatically it is not so adverse. There are no earthquakes happening. You can move a bulldozer, can move the earth around, and you can do whatever you feel like. The moment you come to a mountainous region like this, which is in seismic zone 5, and which has this waters that can come down those mountains and flood the valley or flood Srinagar the way it did. Between earthquake, sorry, just a second. I'm trying to record my presentation so that I can write that note Dr. Khosla has asked for, otherwise I'll forget. And you'll give us a recording? Okay, fine, then I don't have to worry about that because that's distracting. Okay, so when you look at the valley, which is less than 100 kilometers across the horizontal and about 200 kilometers or 250 kilometers across the other way, you've got 26 of these mighty rivers or rivulets that kind of fall into the river Jhelum. And there in the center somewhere, there's a pointer. Yeah, here. This is where Srinagar is. This is the urban area of Srinagar. And all these valleys with Pahalgam this side, Sonmarg this side, somewhere Yusmarg, Gulmarg, all these, I mean, when you look at this micro area, it's quite a phenomenon to kind of understand and work with. This is what I call as the waters of Kashmir, because here's Verinag. This is where the Mughals built the Jahangir built his Mughal garden here, where the water spouts out of the bottom of this, and you've got this gushing blue water, which is the mouth of River Jhelum. Then is Achabal, which is the other Mughal garden. You come down on the single spine, and you reach Srinagar, which has got these beautiful Zabarwan hills right here with the water coming down, the Dal Lake with its springs and the streams. And then you have the historic city, which is right here. Oops. Okay. So this is what, when you look at the map, this is the historic city, the downtown area where the river moves from south to north. And this is where it was earlier, and this is the part that did not get flooded, and when we had the floods in 2014. And what is very fascinating with the Dal Lake is all these backwaters and the floating, the gardens, which actually provides a certain amount of food security for the valley when it is cut off from the rest of the country. Why I'm talking about this is because it has a direct bearing on the nature of development you do. And these are the Mughal gardens, which is on this particular edge of the Dal Lake. So how the city grew over time. But unfortunately, what do you see today? You see the riverfront where the city has actually turned its back towards the city. Jhelum is hugely polluted because all the towns are around it. Unfortunately, the backwaters are hugely polluted. The smart city, in spite of what has happened to the city, okay, another point I'd like to make is that the groundwater is very high. The groundwater in parts of Srinagar are just about 0.5 meter below ground. And so what happened post the floods of 2014 is the groundwater has got so contaminated that the drinking water is very, very poor. So today, through government programs, they're trying to address infrastructure, but I was a bit amazed because when I looked at the downtown, what I was told by the SMC, the Srinagar Municipal Corporation, was the way they were laying out the sewerage line, they were not going to address the wastewater that by gravity goes towards Jhelum. They were going to do a trunk on the highest road like that. Everything which was higher is going to fall into the trunk, but where it goes down towards Jhelum, below the trunk system, the water would continue. So you see all this wastewater thing. So as part of the tourism project, we actually proposed to the Ministry of Tourism that we would like to look at through innovative ways of putting small collection points where wastewater can be pumped up, and do constructed wetlands and things like that to be able to address some even look and feel of this place, The master plan is a huge opportunity. So smart city is a huge opportunity to intervene. I was involved in drafting the chapter on heritage here and cultural and natural heritage to inform urban planning, architecture, livelihood, tourism, risk preparedness and disaster management, and mobility planning are some of these opportunities that the zonal plans offer for improvement to do the appropriate kind of intervention at the city level. In the tourism project, what we came upon was, now here I'm looking at the master plan, I'm looking at smart city, which found the ABD to be the historic city. Through tourism, we said, okay, let's look at precincts on the edge of these water systems and try to do ecologically restoration as your fundamental principle to inform the nature of intervention that you do, and improve these precincts for tourism consumption. So instead of beautification, can we actually use principles of ecological restoration in these precincts on the edge of the Dal Lake? Because I do believe that if you do something meaningful for the Dal Lake, it will go a long way in terms of what people their appreciation of the nature of intervention that happened. That's critical. Yeah. So these are the kind of drawings that I have, and the kind of micro level intervention, and it's kind of informed by a strategy by what Patrick Geddes, who I consider as a very, very important town planner, who was a botanist, a sociologist, and a town planner in the turn of the early part of the 19th century, who introduced the concept of diagnostic survey, the valley section, and conservative surgery. And that's what I feel we need to fundamentally do in the valley, in the urban areas, and even in the rural areas, in the settlements, to kind of heal both on psychological level and physical and in the ecosystem where we are with it right now. This is what the riverfront looks like. This is appalling. And under a World Bank funded project, the embankment has got restored in the most hideous way. And all these sewer lines and all still continue to go in. How can you say this is a project that was worth doing, the way they've done? So through tourism, we're trying to do these little place-making interventions, a little micro-infrastructure, participatory planning, which actually should be part of the mainstream processes. There's another project of Yarkand Sarai, where the Ladakhis live. And because that was the connection, Srinagar was on the connector with the Silk Route, through Leh, going towards Yarkand, and these 72 families live there. And they're very keen that, okay, as long as you keep us together, you please rehabilitate us because the space is very tight. And then, of course, conservation, rehabilitation. I do believe that maybe about 20 families could have continued living here. But there are people this is one thing I find even different between Punjab and in Kashmir. Kashmir, people want to talk, people want to engage, they want to share, they want to participate so quickly that I was there 2 weeks ago. In spite of all the recent happenings, they still want to engage on one-to-one level. And I think that's critical to use that as a methodology. This is another intervention on the Hari Parbat area, since I'm running short of time, just to get you the feel of, the kind of interventions we are talking about through the tourism project. in one of the precincts, UNESCO World Heritage inscription for branding. And that's the spot which has the gardens. You have the Shalimar Garden here and the Nishad Bagh here. These are the backwaters protected under Lauda. One critical challenge there is the multi-department thing, though they all come under the Department of Urban Development, that to be able to have a platform where you can actually have conversations across the multiple sub-departments. The other aspect which I feel which is critical in tourism, which what Laila said this morning, livelihood enhancement in crafts through linkages with tourism value chain. Because I do believe, talking about resilience, that tourists cannot get into the valley. We know what happens, whether it's the weather or it's other unforeseen whatever challenges. But if such large amount of investments are going into tourism destination development, it is important that these projects themselves create the demand of the craft. Because, you stay in hotels, you still get Kisan jams, we don't get local fruit jam or something. When you're doing interiors of that work, Khatam Bandi ceiling is the only ceiling that is being used. In terms of the products that are being used for the interiors, if you look at the Kashmiri craft or their hand-produced things, roti, kapda and makan, all three can be addressed, Even their food is not celebrated, which is a huge cuisine other than Vazwan. They've got a huge vegetarian narrative as well, their haq saag from the backwaters and things like that. You don't find them in hotels till you make special requests. So that needs policy support, and it needs to be supported by programs of the government that you have to use 30% of your funding has to be used in local products, in making of the destinations. These are clear-cut. So these were some of the project components that we kind of thought: capacity building and co-creation of products, facility creation at one particular destination. There's a leper hospital which is not utilized, which is a lovely building on Nagin Lakefront. Innovative marketing and creating demand from within the tourism value chain, and then the culinary arts promotion. Last one, but not the least, are the two schools project. Now the Dhaji architecture, the Dhaji and the Kashmiri architecture is primarily the Tak and Dab. Now, Tak and Dab architecture, actually, we brought in IIT Madras in here. Their Department of Civil Engineering houses National Center for Safety of Heritage Structures. And I brought them in to make a collaboration with NIT Srinagar to engage the students of civil engineering from that department and IIT Madras. Because what Professor Menon, who heads that department, said was in IIT Madras that not enough work has happened in understanding what makes Tak and Dab architecture earthquake responsive. And then from the initial studies, we realized that not only is the foundation isolated from the superstructure, every floor of this building is an isolated floor. And that happens because at the bottom above the foundation, they have a timber frame like that. Then they do the verticals, and they do another timber member right across, and they put the joists, and the joists are not nailed onto that particular thing. And then they have another runner on which the top floor comes up. As a result, when the earthquake happens, each floor can move. So each floor is an isolated floor. But this needs proper study, and it needs to be through computer modeling and all that, needs to be understood. And the same system goes in because there the masonry is the infill. The same thing in Anwar Shah Kashmiri, his house, and this apparently happens in other parts of Kashmir also, this kind of building, that it's the same system. Isolated floors and bracing around openings, and then the infill timbers like that. So we definitely need to look at, these are the recommendations that I make, is that conservation, adaptive reuse of historic built fabric, protecting the cultural identity is critical. Research and development to codify the knowledge for the application new buildings as resilient architecture. Need to retrofit lifeline buildings. I was talking to Professor Ramshu in the Earth Sciences Department in Kashmir University, and he said, the timbers have been replaced, but they have not been replaced by reinforced cement concrete. They just put one little saria about the khirkis. He says, should there be an earthquake, the kind that happened in 2005 in POK, if it were to happen this side, he said, we are sitting on a ticking time bomb. He says the buildings are, even today, he said that the lifeline buildings are also not retrofitted. So there's key to hospitals, schools and all that. Smart city and tourism projects are opportunities for inclusive participatory program-based planning and projects with clear indicators, master plan and regional development strategies in the valley. The zonal plans are an opportunity for demonstrating good practice, and partnerships and training and capacity building are critical for youth in particular. Thank you.